So, welcome to ThinkFest Conversations, and it is a great pleasure and honor to be with Senator Sherry Rehman, who is Pakistan's foremost parliamentarian, a leading voice on women's rights, human rights, and democracy. Senator Rehman has a long list of accomplishments, but let me just name a few. She's a fourth-term parliamentarian, a diplomat, a civil society activist, and is currently the leader of opposition in Pakistan's Senate. And she's also been the ambassador of Pakistan to the US, as well as the Federal Minister for Information and Broadcasting. It is such a great pleasure, Sherry, to talk about your new book. And a volume that comes at a very critical time when we see a new wave of feminism and women's activism in the country. And I thought that the title is so provocative and catchy. So maybe I'll start with that. We know about mansplaining, but I think let's talk a bit about mansplaining and womansplaining. I mean, how did you? And you mentioned in your introduction that you appropriated this term to articulate certain voices. So maybe let's start with the title. How did you come up with the title?
Thank you very much, Raza. I have tried to, and you've been always a supporter of women's rights, in not just in Pakistan, but everywhere in the world. So you will understand, and I'm sure many of our viewers would, that there's been a long history of women not speaking out or constantly being asked to hold back or being the last to have their say, if at all. So, I mean, one of the factors keeping women's voices off the public agenda anywhere in the world, and I'm not just saying Pakistan, anywhere in the world, and particularly in South Asia and Pakistan, has been a large infrastructure of insidious patriarchy that keeps women always slightly off the center, slightly not in charge, perhaps token. And so when men always speak out before or speak for women and make decisions for women, of course. So, I mean, the term mansplaining has come into play not from me or anybody, and it has a pejorative and a negative term. And I explained in my book that often I would say to people, no, let me just womansplain this to you because you're mansplaining to me. And very often, I think women just want to have their say. They're not trying to talk anyone down, nor are they looking to shut men out of the conversation or exclude voices. Women are, I think, naturally inclusive, and we're bigger nurturers. We run the largest care economy in the world, as you know. And in Pakistan, so it's become very challenging as the years go on to even speak out. Today we are seeing young women who are angry and unka gussa bahut jaiz. If I may also slip into Urdu once in a while, bahut jaiz hai gussa. It's very valid. And look at the lives they're having to lead. Just every statement, every har mutalba, jo bhi mange, jo bhi kahe, kitna bhi choti baat ho, it just gets met with such violent responses. That naturally women are beginning to ask, this is the 21st century. We should not really be having to talk about the same things we spoke about 30, 40 years ago. But here we are not even only talking about the same things, but we're now being questioned about why we're actually speaking out. I'm not saying we weren't questioned before, but there were some easier binaries to operate in. Today it's a world where the culture of misogyny is so the word for it is insidious. It's so spread out, and it's in every it's in every texture of conversation, society, public, private, that women really need the ability to hold on to some hope that they have people speaking for them, that there is a history of women speaking out, and that there will always continue to be those that speak out for others, and for that, and in those I include my men friends too, such as yourself, and supporters and colleagues. There are many. So this is not it's not an exclusive term. It includes, like women tend to, in our circle of growth and nurturing. And I think this is something that we need to claim for ourselves, in terms of space and rights and
Yeah.
soapboxes, if you
Yeah.
like.
No, thank you. And so I do want to ask many questions about your own journey, but I think I would like to first focus a bit on the anthology itself.
Sure.
22 leading voices.
Yeah.
Younger and older. From Hina Jalani yourself to Rimmel and the new upcoming feminists. So I mean, how did you put together the list and bringing them all together? I mean, it is a difficult selection. I mean, you've been an editor as well,
Oh
and
God.
so so what was the process? I mean, how did you identify them? I mean, I know there's a great essay by Nigat Dad on digital age. How feminists are navigating social media and this. So maybe a bit about the process.
Yes. So, Raza, as you know, things are not easy, especially when you're putting big voices together. People tend to feel that they must say what they must, and that's fair, I think, what they must say. But what I did was curate this over a period of time. It's something I wanted to do for a long time, and actually, it was a commitment I had made to other women. Asma Shirazi once said 2-3 years ago at a lecture, said to me, I was keynoting there, and I made some corrections to what the younger women had perceived or understood to be outcomes of the old women's, the very achievable, you could see identifiable women's movements, particularly the 1980s one, which led to the creation of WAF, etc., and some superheroes, from Asma Jahangir to many others. And in that particular conversation, they turned around and said to me, including Asma Shirazi, that this is your responsibility, that we don't know about these things, that we don't know that you actually took the teeth out of the Hudud ordinance, or all sorts of other activisms that went on. I said, you're actually quite right. And so that this germ stayed in my mind. And then during the first COVID wave, I had a bit of time to think about it. My collaborator in this, I have to say, was another man, Hassan Akbar, who was working at the GI Institute at that time. We put together a list, we thrashed and rethrashed. So I said, I want the older women, the heroes as I call them, to actually speak about their own journeys, the context they worked in, how they saw movements at that time linked to South Asian larger movements, because that was the case. There was a different context, and what our confrontation and challenges were, and how they see the new generation. Because I saw that the two generations had different impetuses, different contexts, and I felt there was a need to build a bridge also, like a convening. This is a book, is a sort of intellectual convening of sorts, and those are needed. And then after getting some of the stories out, we started thinking, now let's assign actual areas of concern to women who have actually achieved and spoken out in those areas. So we had trouble with, it goes to Afia Zia Maslan has always been writing about, gender, class, all of that. So she addressed that. Other than the personal journeys, and of course Farida's essay was quite stellar. She has covered movements, the history of and of culture, and how she sees that is important. Zora was told to address her journey. Khabar and Hina wanted, and I said, because you've been working in the legal field, how women have worked through how women have used the courts and law, actually the law more than the courts. So she understood the power of that. Then many of the younger women also chose, like Fifi Harun has been looking for a long time at how women are stereotyped and their stories told through myth making on popular Pakistani cinema, which has great power in shaping narratives and opinions and views, and what you must do in the home where decisions are really made.
Yes.
And for Sharmeen Obaid to tell her in her own very, a direct, candid way of how she made movies and what she thought was important. And she's a storyteller. So I said, you tell the stories you're seeing. And Zinia Shaukat, because she's worked in labor, I said, you must talk about what we need to do, because there's a lot more that needs to be done for women in labor. So we did, and Sara Malkani about women in the courts. So she's dealing in the court system. She's doing what her sisters did. Maliha Zia, Shela Zia's daughter, they're all doing the same things. They're still dealing with the same things, but they're encountering new problems, right?
Right.
But that was the way. I mean, Aisha Razak to address education, Shanaz Wazir Ali to address the health challenge. So people who worked in and who've excelled in their subjects and fields, we thought they would, climate stress, all of that.
Yes, I mean, it kind of brings in a wide variety of contemporary challenges, especially, where patriarchy sort of makes either services or rights difficult. I mean,
And as you can see, I had to badger Rafia Zakria to write about the COVID, and then COVID started creating a crisis for women, domestic violence, all. So people were really forthcoming. They just responded so generously. I'm very grateful, and I mean, even to the edits, to everything.
Yes, I mean, no, that's, I mean, the work speaks for itself, and that's what strikes you when you read through. I mean, it's also a kind of an alternative commentary and insight into contemporary Pakistan, with women's voice. So I find that as a most valuable part of this book. But I also do wonder, Senator Rehman, how do you see, and your own essay on the Parliament, which is, of course, I find it not only very interesting, but as a central sort of piece in this volume, because we have seen contradictory trends. I mean, we have seen on the one hand, women such as yourself, tabling all these laws, bringing about legislative changes, generating business in the Parliament. And on the other hand, we also see a pushback, on the reserved quotas and, the current ruling party. I mean, they in the past have been challenging these seats, and they've been saying this is all the elite, quote unquote, women come to the Parliament, and you address this issue as well. So I'd like to know a bit more, and I'm sure viewers would be interested in, you as a parliamentarian, as a politician, how have you navigated this space, and what do you think of women's role in the Parliament at large,
Raza, it's a very tough space. If I may call you Raza, since you're hell-bent on calling me Senator Rehman. It's a challenge, and it's like women's lives, activisms, and work everywhere in the world. It's certainly in Pakistan. It's maybe one step backward, and the Khabar Mumtaz book is 2 steps forward and 1 step. But now it feels very often like 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards. Very often it feels like that, which is why as the journalist said to me the other day, I felt I had to do the book, because there have been many steps taken forward. Women have been stellar performers despite their drawbacks, their lack of parliamentary literacy, etc. Have been stellar performers in Parliament, and still we have to confront things like, oh, what are women actually doing? I mean, there was an educated people's group, I'll have to say literate people's WhatsApp, these WhatsApp groups. And one of them said, oh, why aren't the women standing up and changing all this tomorrow? I was like gobsmacked, and I said, which context are you living in, and why must the women actually speak out on it? What are you doing about it? And women actually have carried very often 17 to 21% of women in Parliament. That's the total we've ever risen to, including general seats. Have at times the parliamentary business quota has reached 72% by women. By that 21%, often 17%, and literally it's a core of 10%. They just push and that transformed parliamentary discourse. People don't realize it. That 2002 assembly onwards, where I had moved 5 bills for women's empowerment and media freedoms and other, freedom of information. So all of that it changed the discourse, and women have stayed that course. They not just, well, now they speak about everything, and they move on everything, but they're vigilant. They do their homework, and despite the kind of media glare that we are subjected to, oh, what color was she wearing, what was her bag looking like, that goes on still. It still goes on, right? And this objectification carries on, but women just have stayed the course and are even more forthcoming in supporting each other across the. Like when I became chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, right, I noticed that women across the divide were actually very supportive. And one person, actually not from my party, transferred into the committee. She said, "I want to be in your committee." So there is this kind of there's an edginess to our lives there, because you never know when you'll have to stand up and defend total nonsense
Yes.
and misogyny at large, to the point where somebody is saying the worst type is like, "Oh, the fairer sex do this."
Yeah.
Excuse me. I mean, there's that kind of 20,
Yes.
Jane Austen like talk going on, and Jane Austen was modern and autonomous compared to what goes on there. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's tough, and it's important to belong to a progressive or a party that is clear about these things. So very often we are ending up standing alone in telling the rest of the parliament, you cannot speak like this to women or about women, or somehow, there's always a kind of insidious mummy track, but that your real job is at home. I mean, you're all mothers and sisters, aren't you? And I have to stand up and say, well, my identity is mine entirely. I've navigated this, and it doesn't matter whose wife, mother, sister, daughter I am. I'm sorry, that's not the source of my identity. And you have to keep saying this to give, courage and hope and hostla to others. And then they start. So now, like you have many conversations that wouldn't happen in the past, but happen now. I remember Iqbal Haider having to defend something 20 years ago in the Senate, which was not some egregious incident of violence, one of those rape incidents, and that was being, condoned and all of that, or like it is today. But he wasn't even allowed to speak, or allowed to. Nobody supported him except the People's Party around him, cluster around him. Now it's politically incorrect now. So that's the good thing.
Yeah.
This may well be reversed, because bills even today, you would be outraged that open domestic violence bills, whom no one could object to or should object to, are still sent off to bodies outside Parliament, are still whataboutery, right?
Yeah.
From the so.
What about you? Yes, I think, and you in your introduction, you also mentioned somewhere that how these changes and steps forward are vulnerable to both reversal. Yeah. So I also and you dwell a bit on the the new wave, Aurat March, whom late Rubina Sehgal, who just recently passed away, called the fourth wave in Pakistan. So I think I think it would be great to hear from you, SR, about this young women's sort of marching in big cities, small cities, and making their voice heard, and the kind of backlash they're getting, from all quarters. So, what do you see? I mean, how do you see this, and how do you frame in the from Women Action Forum to the kind of work your generation did, and then to this sort of new age feminism?
So these younger women, I mean, we all, the older lot, feel that they are living in a much more complex set of, they're facing a far more complex set of challenges. There's violent extremism has come to the surface since, the 1990s onwards, in ways that we have not seen before. The space for progressive conversations and public discourse, as you know, keeps shrinking. So women get caught in the crosshairs of that. They have no longer, first elected prime ministers of the Muslim world like Benazir Bhutto inviting them into parliament, giving them hostas. So there's none of that anymore. There's a different culture. And while, yes, the digital forums do create a a lot of space for change and speaking out. As you know, they can be very predatory.
Yeah.
So women are facing different predations, uh, and more of them, I feel, as much as they are open to seeking public spaces and speaking out. And the younger women, I'm fascinated at the stunning array of classes, voices, backgrounds that come together on International Women's Day. They do the Aurat March, and it's actually become a beautiful movement, but it's not really cohered into a movement as such. And many of our sisters would say that it's not a movement with identifiable, outcomes attached to it. I mean, there need to, I feel, now engage with, and one of the reasons outcomes are not identifiable, they have goals, they identify them every year, they put down an impressive list of, you know, tasks, from the state and from society, and because it's all, the underlying need is structural, of course, but you still have to chip away somewhere. You have to start with the unglamorous part of the increment, and keep at it. And in this, I think they have not connected to the power of the political. They see, or the partisan political. I mean, they don't engage with political parties. They don't engage with the state, which, as Khabar Mumtaz and others will tell you in this whole grouping, some of the young women do, and they learn to engage when there's a backlash against them. So the WhatsApp group in which I'm engaging with Aurat Marches is called Backlash. They called it Backlash. When there was a backlash, they found me. I said, always open arms for you guys and support for you guys, but realize that you will have to engage in a sustained, coherent manner for achievable outcomes. You can't, you're grappling with too much. They are talking about body politics and personal needs, which is very refreshing. It's extremely refreshing.
Yes.
And we were busy engaging with laws and dismantling Zia. We were obsessed with dismantling Zia. What to do. So it's opened up a real, a glittering, a spectacular array of possibilities.
Yes.
And there needs to be an intergenerational conversation, lessons learned from each other, solidarities across the board that last through the year. And not just when a backlash is encountered, but as a proactive set of agenda items that they want from the state and governments and political parties to give them.
Yes.
To give us,
Yeah, no, indeed. I mean, I totally agree with you. I'm myself fascinated by the resolve and I mean, look at how also the digital sort of advocacy, because our Prime Minister, who made certain extremely inappropriate comments about women's dressing and all of that, so he had to take a step back, because of the pressure that was mounted by women and women leaders like yourself. So that was a small victory, I would say, but of course we are navigating in a sea of misogyny, unfortunately. So I also want to quickly talk about the media, because I mean, many know, but many viewers may not know that you originally are a journalist and an editor, and you touch upon this in your the book also raises these issues, like the columnists who are completely anti-women, anti-Aurat March, a TV presenter come a member of parliament from the ruling party who's been making really, extremely offensive remarks about women and women activism. So what do you think has changed in the media, or do you see any change in the mainstream media with regard to women's projection of their roles, their place in society, their concerns? Is it better, or has it regressed?
It's a that's a very layered question, and it deserves a layered response as opposed to talking in binaries. I won't talk in binaries because that's just not the real world. That may make for a catchier headline or a better hashtag, But I think that's where we get trapped in passing judgment, and that's what you're really talking about. That
Yeah.
they are so, and of course, social media tends to veer towards clickbait and catchiness, and in that space and in that search for attention in a minefield of information. Right now, there's too much to go through in a day. You know this.
Yeah.
And you have to choose, and you don't want your algorithm to choose for you, so you have to choose, and sort of find yourself in alleyways that sometimes you don't want to be, but real research and intellectual pathways go through many rigorous and unrigorous methods and intellectual alleyways. This environment actually pits women in a serious maelstrom of misogyny, where the trends veer towards the right away. The moderate voices, let alone the leftist or progressive voice, the moderate voices then find themselves defending their space, right? They're just on the defensive or fighting back, and the trends and the bots and the right farm, the farms go towards the right. And
Yes.
everybody, so a lot of women and vulnerable people, or just few voices, younger people, they're like, oh, maybe we should not be engaging in this space, which also gives them a retreat. Then basically you're retreating from the platform, and there is a huge human temptation to do that. There's so much filth out there that you're like, oh my God, I want to not be in this mud, in this whirlpool of misogyny and jeers and insults and calling out people. But that's what the women are facing today, especially young girls and adolescents and post-adolescents. It's a very hostile, predatory space for them. Uh, to one should not have to have the confidence to say, I'm not even going to look at the nonsense they're spewing. I'm just going to keep saying what I think is important and engage with the few moderate voices that are out there, because they are. I mean, you're out. People are out there, and we need to hang on to those and build those bridges. But journalism is not what it used to be.
Yeah.
There are no moderators. The editors would moderate every newspaper, even television. So social media or new media is not moderated, it seems, by anyone. That Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg may be doing something, but I don't need to get into the perils of that conversation. The digital spaces are too open for exploitation, and they still lead to witch hunts, literally, of people. You've seen it. We've all been subject to them.
Yes, exactly, exactly. No, thank you for as you rightly said, a layered response, and I think that needs to be reminded. But I do, before I open it up for audience questions, I do want to ask you one more question about the book. So you dedicated to late Benazir Bhutto Shaheed. So I would like you to talk a little bit about that dedication and also your own personal journey. I mean, Benazir Bhutto played a very important role. I mean, you were brought into politics and mentored in a way by such a towering woman herself. And, also that also negates this misogynistic trope that औरत ही औरत की औरतें औरतों को आगे नहीं आने देती, that kind of all nonsense we hear. So talk a little bit about that, because I think
I'd love to. Dekho, Raza, Benazir Shaheed was a firm believer in not just mainstreaming women, but giving outspoken women a megaphone, and she did that, and basically recruited me in politics. And I was quite diffident about coming out from a civil society and journalist role, which allows you a certain amount of freedom. And politics has its own restrictions. So I said, I'm not sure you want somebody as outspoken and undiplomatic as myself. I like to be candid. I like to say my mind, speak my mind. I've learned to moderate much of it.
yes.
And can you imagine sending me as ambassador? Oh God. So I really had to do that over there. It was a learning process and a journey of, just like this book, everything has to be a journey or it means nothing, right? Or where you learn and grow. And she was she had so much time for the little person in the day, in terms of mentoring and actually responding to queries that were just, not necessarily leading to her gain at all. I mean, I'd send an email sometimes saying, how is virtue, I mean, can one still be virtuous and do good politics? Sometimes, two steps back, the art of compromise, all of that. And she said, yes, of course. Now, laboriously responding, and, curating and cultivating a political persona, giving the confidence. I was not a speaker. I was a writer. And she would just say, I saw you on TV. Look at how you held yourself with great confidence. So one gets encouraged. So I try to do that for young women wherever I meet and see them and encounter them. It's the taking out of time. They need the time. And that's the most important thing you can do for people, because in today's world, time is the new money, really. It's the new currency of everything. So she did that. I learned that. And then the model of politics of not rolling up the ladder behind you, keep it there. Give a hand to those trying to climb that ladder, and you will be rewarded tenfold. I mean, this is what is important. And I really want to, I keep telling my institute, maybe you can help, Raza, is I really want to spend an hour or more of a week just giving time, mentoring. And I think the Zoom space and the digital space, I just want to speed mentor if needed, a whole horde of young women out there in need of sometimes just support and encouragement. And it anguishes me to see women on Twitter, etc., speak out, saying I'm no longer wanting to speak anymore. We see such aggression against us and such vilification.
Yes.
And I DM'd some of them. I said, random girl. I said, please don't be afraid. There are people out there wanting to speak to you of this. And I've shared my number. And it's that's the kind of thing Benazir Bhutto always did. But nobody was too small for her attention, which is a very big thing for such a big leader. I mean, she was a prime minister when I met her, So, and then of course the constant. We have to, women like me, I don't have a constituency. I don't come from a landed family or a big business family. So I'm always having to, I bring ideas and whatever, my intellect to the table, and that's what she wanted. But even while she was there, she would say, yes, I understand how hard you have to push for a seat at the table, even with my being there. And a constant reinvention of your gravitas every day. Because you have long hair. ये सब होता है. ये सब reinvention. And she saw that struggle and said, I hear you, and understood it. And I stayed on after she passed away because I was understood by the leadership even then. And, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari came later. He, of course, is very pro-women, but you'd be surprised at how Mr. Zardari actually prefers women. I mean, doesn't tokenize them.
Yes, and I know.
You don't walk away. You are all the baggage I have. It's not just baggage. I expect to work with all of you. And I mean, which party in these days makes a woman leader of opposition in the political pit? I mean, I'm now the parliamentary leader, but it's a very tough job, and it's a choice no party is willing to make right now. Putting women in executive jobs is different. They do that also. Speaker, foreign minister. Those are very different. Here you're in the political pit every day making bargains and deals, and to still keep your political Qibla durust, your political compass where it is, and not bargain away women's rights is very tough.
Exactly.
But the progressive parties allow you to do that. They say we'll lose 1 or 2 votes, we'll get another somewhere else.
Very insightful. Very insightful. We have a few audience questions, and we'll just take a couple. But before I do that, I do want to add, because younger people must be seeing this, and You mentioned, Esther, about your intellect being there, but I should also remind them that since I have worked with you, or I've had the pleasure of working with you, you worked very hard. You're very hard working. So ये नौजवान लोग जो है वो ये भी देख लें कि काम मेहनत बहुत करनी पड़ती है. Intellect तो अब जरूरी है, but that's what. So we'll talk about that. So the first question that I want to from our audience is, how should this movement, I mean the feminist movement, include women on the religious right? So Afia touches that as well in the volume, but maybe let's hear from you.
Yeah, it's very difficult. This is a difficult question, and it's something that we still grapple with every day. You don't want to exclude any woman. You want to have them in the room, in the tent, on the table, contributing, because they're women too. And they're often subject to another layer of exclusions, if you like, and rankings on the pole of hierarchies that they face. And hierarchies are what we have to deal with. In and of that, those women are also working harder. I notice it. They're competent, they're smart. I'm talking about the best of the lot in every party. The women are competent, they're smart, they're bringing a lot of hard work to the table, because women just have to. You have to do double the hours, okay, to be taken seriously. You can't just slide into the room and say, oh, well, I haven't read my stuff. So women know that to be heard. And so the women of the religious right have a disadvantage. They are sadly often used as shock troops, and even all parties, by the way, especially the younger junior women, up, and they're put there very often in token positions to talk about a restricted area of achievable outcomes and rights that they seek. So they end up circumscribing their own spaces, and often having to limit how far they can cut a swathe, if you like, right? And they're never made leaders, are they? They're never made leaders. Have you seen that? They will defend the fact that they're not made leaders, but I feel that they deserve more. And I never disengage with them. I always engage with them. Unfortunately, or not fortunately, unfortunately, the decisions for the votes always come from their male leadership, because they're the male leaderships. So their impact and influence on decision making, on the agenda, which is extremely important, goes down. Now, when I'm in the lead and I'm sitting in a decision making position, it changes the agenda. I will not accept this. You will say, no, this is happening. And there are loads of things that happen in a day, in even one single bill that has nothing to do with women, for instance, or a resolution. I'll say, no, you'll have to put that penalty back. You're just going to have to put it back. And I'm to now at 60 able to do all this. I certainly at 40 I wasn't. So the older you are, of course, the better it is. The more seriously you're taken. I also have a formidable voice, and they don't want to be at the receiving end of that, because if they do that, then they really hear from me on the floor of the Senate who exactly you are, what you're speaking out against, and do not tell me that you're from a political party that espouses anything that is close to Qaeda-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah's values. Remember those. Those are a great refuge for all of us. I'm to a People's Party, so I have my manifesto, which actually is not just a branding thing as far as women are concerned. It actually speaks to real issues and stands for them. But a lot of women have to just have that refuge. And it's tough for women from the religious right. They will disagree with me violently. They'll say, this is what we want. I'm not so sure. I see them as greatly, they're talented, they're bright, and they're very hardworking. And so they need to be taken more seriously by their own leadership.
Exactly. Thank you. This another question we have is, how can men become part of the conversation? What can women do to make men understand better?
Yeah, I think this is very, very important, and some of our younger friends should also understand that in a day of anger, sometimes there is a lot of anger. and in a reaction to many discriminations, there are daily diminutions of women. Okay, they just downgrade women all the time, and then of course there are egregious violations. So in that entire bandwidth, there's always anger. If you hold yourself as autonomous, even a part of you, your identity or yourself or your mind is thinking of yourself as an autonomous person, then there's always going to be a ripple of anger at what you have to go through. But I've noticed that many women are able to just say, okay, this is the way things are. That's how they get through. That's the coping mechanism. For men, that is, of course, the norm. This is the status quo. This is how the world turns. And you want our protection. And I'm like, no, I'm standing here speaking out for you. Now it's time you speak for me. So you just have to have a louder voice and be much more of a dragon lady than others to get into that dynamic where you're not just unfortunately sometimes you have to be feared a little bit, and that कि ओ अब शेरमान कह देंगी कुछ ना कुछ तो फिर हम अपने एक तमीज के जामे में रहें, लाइफ में रहें. तमीज से ज्यादा आप खड़े हो भैया, टर्न अराउंड से खड़े हो, क्या कर रहे हो? And they're like, okay. yeah, and there's nothing better than if there's a progressive man supporting you. I mean, like Hassan wrote a piece saying why men must read Womansplaining. So I think it's very important. There was Haris hosting some of our shows. People asked me, don't you want women? I said, no. I've had women write this, but I want men as part of the permanent conversation. Because to bring structural or sustainable change, you can't exclude half the world's population. You've got to carry them, and you can't do the same things you revile men for, that you excluded us from this conversation, or you got clubby about this and made sure we were left out and made decisions about us. No. You cannot imitate those you seek to change, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that's great. So our last question, noting
that I need to radicalize you, but a lot of men need that, don't they?
Of course, I think.
I'm amazed at how many of my men friends have actually responded by saying, we didn't know how bad things were before or now or later, and we're very sober. Some were actually even sad. I said, what are you sad about? This is our lives. And these are empowered women. Every single one of them can write and read in English. So obviously they're empowered, right?
Yeah. I know that's how it is. But yes, they have to be reminded again and again. So the last question, SR, is Fatima Jinnah, Rana Liaquat Ali, Benazir Bhutto. Pakistan's strong leaders have been women. What do you think of women as icons of leadership in Pakistan?
The best face forward. Even today, when you do the soft image of Pakistan or project power of Pakistan, that's not hard. It's always the women you're turning to, whether they're the mountain climbers or the filmmakers getting the awards. Sharmeen and Malala, well, Malala they've been ambiguous about, but I would hold her name with great pride for a girl who stood up for so much after enduring so much. And so there are many women who, once they excel, Pakistan is very proud of them. And even today, I've said it in one of my intros that when push comes to shove, just matriculation exams, inter exams, look at the list who tops up on top. Girls. They're working very hard. Of course, there are exceptions like you. But
thank you.
But there are men who do really well. But given just a minute proportion of resources, women do fabulously well. They just need an opportunity. और opportunity के साथ support मिल जाए तो फिर तो वो दुनिया तब्दील कर सकती है ना.
Very true. Very
true. In Pakistan, I think they're still Pakistan's best face forward.
Yes, I mean, so yeah, I guess that's a great answer, and I see, just to tell our viewers that the book has been endorsed by Malala Yousafzai herself. It has also been endorsed by Tina Brown, who's an editor of the Daily Beast, by Justice Majida Rizvi, and Hillary Clinton, who calls it poignant, profound, and powerful. So please do get this book and.
Can
Give
I
you.
say, Raza, it's sold out. It's on a second print run.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So,
Thank you very much.
well, it had to. Sherry, the star power plus the intellect. I mean, all brought together in this volume. Thank you
It's,
so much.
it's the 22 women, the stars who wrote this.
Exactly. That's what I meant. The collective stardom. You have all the big names and the popular and the profound names in volume. So thank you so much for the time, and I guess we will hope. I mean, I hope to continue this conversation because there's so much that I want to ask you in this particular context and about your own work, and hopefully there'll be another time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. ThinkFest. Thank you, Raza.
Thank you.